everyone, this is Izzy at Minerva. In today's video we are going to be looking at how to create a standing collar, which is a traditional simple collar with a nice stand to it. This is a great little detail in terms of just creating a more formal looking garment, and we're just going to use our standard body block for this video. So go and grab your body block and trace over it. We are going to use the combined waist dart for this video, as we've done with the previous collars, just to simplify the construction of the front of the garment. As ever, you're going to need your standard pattern drafting tools, which are listed next to me here. So in this video, we're going to take a good deep dive look into how to create and draft that collar. If you want more details on how to create the opening, the strap opening to the shirt, you can refer to video 62, which is coming along in a couple of weeks, where we do a whole little mini series all about openings for the front of the garment and how to create those in a lot more detail. We will cover it briefly in today's video though for you. A lot of what we're going to be doing today is actually sort of independent drawing using figures and maths. So to start off with, we're going to look at our front bodice with the combined waist dart. We've moved the shoulder dart down to the waist, so we've just got a nice simple block. And the first thing we're going to do is just simply to drop the neckline by 1 centimetre, and only 1 centimetre. So mark a point that is 1 centimetre, drop down, and then just find a nice soft curve to make that neckline just a little bit lower. We're next going to draft out the collar, and the collar is going to run from the centre back all the way around to our front, and it will be placed on the fold, so it's one continuous long piece when we cut it out. So we're going to start to draw it on a separate piece of paper to our blocks, but what we do need to know is just a couple of measurements from our block to start off with. So the first thing we need to know is our our neck measurement from here up to the shoulder, and then from the shoulder down to the centre back. So grab your tape measure, and we'll start off just by running it round the length of the front neckline and measure that just a couple of times so you're confident you've got that right. That one's 13.4 and the back is 7 centimetres. So grab your calculator and add the neckline here, 13.4 or whatever it is for you, and your back bodice neckline. So for me it's 20.4. You're going to take that measurement and you're going to draw it on a new sheet of paper just straight along. Mark a point along that line, which is 3/4 along that line. So tap in the length of the line and times that by 0.75 and mark that point clearly on the line. Square up 7 centimetres from that point and create a nice rectangle now, which is 7 centimetres tall. Finish up the rectangle, drawing the top of the rectangle, which should be the same length as the bottom. Next, we're going to draw in the height of our collar stand at this point. Now, I'm just going to draw that at 2 centimetres tall, but obviously you can change that depth depending on the aesthetic that you want to create for your collar. Mark a point from this corner, which is 1/2 centimetre, 5 millimetres along this line. Join these 2 points with a nice curve and then extend that line by 1.5 centimetres, which is the width of our collar stand. Mark a point along this line, which is 0.7 centimetres. Then draw in a nice soft curve from here to the collar, which creates the nice collar stand. Next, we're going to draw the point of the collar, and this is the bit that kind of sticks out like that. and that can be whatever depth you want it to be. It could be curved, it could be pointed, whatever you want. For the sake of this traditional sort of collar stand, I'm just going to extend that line so that it's 7 centimetres long. So I'm going to take my point from here and just draw a point 7 centimetres along. Then let's just find a nice soft curve to line those 2 points together. Finish off drawing the top, or effectively the bottom of your collar. Next, mark a point that is 0.7 centimetres from your collar stand line up here, and then just draw in a really nice soft curve from that point down to our 3/4 length point over here. Draw down the side of your collar, and that's your collar piece now completely done. Now to finish off our stand, our collar stand, I'm going to trace around the bottom. That keeps it a nice consistent width or height. Trace over the top to finish off that nice rectangle. The only other thing we need to do is to mark on where the button and the buttonhole will go, and we're going to want that to sit right along the centre front line. That's where the buttons are going to go. So using the little button and buttonhole guide, if my button is going to go right along the centre front, which is here, this line here, I'm going to mark a little point there, and then we know that the buttonhole is going to extend backwards from there. The only other thing that you might want to note on your block is where your notches are going to go to attach the collar stand to the collar. Pop one there and another one there. Okay, let's trace over our collar pieces now, adding the seam allowances as we need to. Starting off with the collar stand, trace over it, adding a 1.5cm seam allowance all the way around with the centre back placed on the fold. Add your annotations and your pattern name. Shirt collar, collar stand, cut 2 on fold. Next, we'll trace over the actual collar pattern piece, which is going to be placed on the fold along the centre back again, and we're going to add our 1.5cm seam allowance all the way around. Don't forget to add your notches across both pattern pieces to ensure they'll tie together nicely when sewn together. Shirt collar, collar outer, cut 1 on fold. In our collar pattern series, we've talked quite a lot about how when you've got the outer collar, it's sitting the bits facing up as you're looking at it, that bit needs to be slightly wider in collar than the under collar, so the under collar can kind of pinch in and pinch under the collar so it sits nice and flat. So we've drawn the outer collar, and that was kept that nice and simple on the block so it didn't get too confusing. What we're going to do now is go back to the block and just draw in an offset of 2mm all the way around so that that helps the under collar to sit nice and tight. Okay, so we're just going to look at the collar pattern piece up here, and we're just going to draw a line that is 2mm offset from the outer collar. Then just draw around your under collar pattern piece using your standard 1.5cm seam allowance. So there we have it, our shirt collar, which is our under collar, and we're just going to cut 1 on the fold. Okay, we're now going to create the strap for the front of the garment so that we can attach our lovely collar that we just spent ages drafting onto our actual top. We're assuming for this that you're going to want to create a straightforward button strap right down the front. Now we are going to go into a lot more detail about how to construct this and ways to alter it in video 65, which is going to be coming along in a couple of weeks when we do a mini series looking at openings. However, for now, we're just going to drop onto it and do it pretty quickly just so you can see how it all ties together when we sew it up. Okay, so on the screen we've got 2 mirrored front bodices. This is the centre front for both of them. Now it's really important to make a note that this is going to be the right side, right front, and that is effectively if the right side of the fabric is facing up on this, so the right side of the fabric is facing up on the screen, this would be the garment that we would wear on the right hand side of our body, which is why it's the right hand side. This one will be our left. The very first thing I'm going to do is just to translate this curve here and just mirror it onto this one. So we dropped the neckline 1 centimetre previously. So we did that, and then we just created a nice soft curve. So this one is going to have our button holes on it, and we are going to create a button stand that is 1.5 centimetres wide. We can do that on both garments. Effectively, what I want you to do is just draw a line 1.5 centimetres offset from the centre front. Now we're also going to want to firm up that centre line where our buttons are going to sit, so we're actually going to extend this side and create a bit of a facing so that it can curve under and sit nice and comfortably underneath the garment, creating a double layer of fabric for our buttons to be sewn onto. So next we're just going to draw our facing onto this left front piece by offsetting a line 3 centimetres away from the button stand. Moving on to the right side, we're just going to add our 1.5 centimetre button stand. Next we're going to draw our button stand, and for us that's going to be the length of the top, and then it is going to be 3 centimetres wide. Mark in where you want the buttons to go along the centre front line. We're using this handy expanding sewing gauge. I'm just going to mark across all of the pattern pieces where we want these button placements to go, and then we'll annotate them accordingly in a minute. Okay, so we're going to draw in our buttonholes, and they're going to run right in the middle of the centre strap like this, and at each of those 5 points that we've just drawn across the pattern piece as our reference. And our buttons are going to go on the left pattern piece right along this centre front line. Grab your tracing paper, let's trace over those, adding seam allowance as required. Now then, we're just going to want to add a few little notches onto our pattern piece because we've got quite a few pieces happening here and it could be a little bit confusing. So let's go back to the pattern pieces and across all 3 add the relevant notches. The first notch that I want to be adding is my centre front notch, just so I can really clearly see where that is on each pattern piece. So my centre front runs down where the buttons are here. Centre front is very clearly annotated here. And on this pattern piece, the centre front is actually in line with the button stand. That's effectively where it's going to be attached onto and under here. Now then, on this pattern piece, the centre front also sits, although it sits here, this is the facing and it's going to go underneath. So our centre front line also sits at the centre of this bit here. Oh, wonderful. Trust me on that, that's all going to work out beautifully once we get it all sewn up together. Don't forget to just annotate your pattern pieces now with the relevant pattern names. So here we've said it's the shirt collar, left front bodice, and we're going to cut 1 with the right side facing up. Shirt collar, right side, shirt collar, right front strap, cut 1 with right side facing up. Now then, as I'm looking at this, I can see we've got the notches for the centre front, but actually we didn't end up putting the notches on our collar pattern pieces, did we? So I'm just going to pop this over here and add that centre front notch onto our collar pattern piece. And you can see this line here was the centre front. So we can see that the notch is going to be right here for the centre front that aligns with the buttonhole there, which will line up with the centre front of the pattern piece once we've sewn it together. Excellent. Now we've drafted out our standard back pattern piece numerous times in this series, so we're just going to whiz through that. If you want to know how to do that in a bit more detail, please refer back to some of the previous videos that we've done, and then we're going to sew it all together. So cut out your tracing paper and then your pattern pieces, making sure to annotate them all nice and clearly. We're going to start off just by doing the preparation work for the front bodice and the back bodice. And we're going to start by sewing the darts together. If you're not sure how to sew darts, just refer back to video 22. Brilliant. Once you've sewn all your darts, just press them all towards the side for both the front and the back. As normal, we're then just going to flip the top over the back with right sides together and just pin the shoulder seams together for both the left and the right side. This then completes the neckline. So we can then add our collar into that in a few minutes. Okay, so the only other thing we need to do to prepare our bodice piece before we look at our collar is just to do our right button stand, which is this one over here. Now I do appreciate that because we're using calico, everything looks the same, right side and wrong side. So in order just to help us with this process, we've obviously written right, so this is our right hand side, but it's also the right side facing up. You can see that because we've not got the dart that way up. And for this one, I'm just going to put RS for right side of fabric. Okay, Now, what effectively we want to do is to pop this over on top, and we just want to create a really nice button stand that looks something a bit like that. If you go and look at a shirt, you'll see exactly what I mean. There's always like a bit of a doubled up piece of fabric on this side where the button stand is. Now, there's lots of different ways of creating this, and this is just one of them. So let's take a look at that. So the first thing we're going to do is to flip our bodice with the wrong side facing up, keeping hold of the right hand side of the garment, which is this one here. With the right side of the fabric facing down of our front strap, we're then just going to pin along the front. Kind of feels a little bit counterintuitive, but if you just follow with me for a few more minutes, you'll see why we're doing it this way around. Stitch along that line using a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Brilliant. Next, I want you just to press that out, and with the right side facing up, I want you to press it all the way over. Okay, so the right side of the button stand is now facing up, along with the right side of the garment facing up. As you press it, you will also notice that the two notches on the top should align perfectly to denote where the centre front is, and likewise at the bottom. Excellent. So all you want to do now is to open that back up again and fold the other raw edge under by 1.5 centimetres. Now again, that should just fold right into the middle of your button stand, just like that. So go and press that in place so the raw edges match up in the middle of the button stand. Wonderful. So once you've done that and press that in place, we're going to fold it over one more time, making sure that our notches are aligning both at the top and at the bottom here. Next, we're just going to pin that in place. We're then going to sew 2 millimeters away from the folded edge all the way down both sides. Beautiful. Okay, so that's looking really nice and neat. Okay, let's look at how to prep and sew the left front bodice. So remember, we've got the 2 notches up here. They both denote where the centre front is. So flip it over and then just turn the raw edge under by 1.5 centimetres and iron in place. Flip it over again so that the notches match up both at the top and the bottom, as that is your centre front line. Just like that, and just iron that in place again. Grab your pins and just pin that in place, and I'm going to be pinning that perpendicular to the folded edge so I can see the pins on both sides. What we want to do now is to sew a line of stitches just to hold the facing down to the garment. This should be about 3 centimetres from the folded edge at this point here, away from there, but we want to sew it with the right side of the fabric facing up on our sewing machine so we get a nice neat finish across the top. Okay, and just like that, we have got our button stand on this side with a nice neat facing, and on this side we've got our button strap on this side with our button holes. Beautiful. We're going to move on now to the collar pattern pieces, and we're going to start to look at how to construct those nice and neatly. This is our outer collar, which we've got here, and this is the under collar on this side here. So with right sides together, we're going to place one on top of the other. And don't forget that the under collar is slightly smaller, and that's okay. We're just going to pin that all the way around the 3 sides up here, leaving the bottom, the area where the notches are, unpinned. You are going to have to ease in the pattern pieces slightly, obviously because one is shorter than the other, and that's to be expected, and that should happen quite naturally because the change isn't that significant. It's only 2 millimeters. Great. Our seam allowance here is 1.5 centimetres, so we're going to sew all the way around using our 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Trim the whole of the seam allowance in half, and then on the outer collar just trim it down in half again. And this is just going to allow the collar to sit nice and flat because we've graded those seam allowances. Next, we're going to turn the collar right side facing out. Now we want to get a nice, crisp, sharp point for our collars. If you're doing it and you find that you've still got quite a bulky corner, you can just trim down the seam allowances a little bit more in that area. Brilliant. Go and press that collar in place once you've turned it the right way out. At this point, if you want to, you can then reinforce the collar with a line of stitches going all the way around the outside. We're not going to do this because we are just checking the fit at this stage. However, I would recommend that you just sew a quick line of basting stitches along the bottom where the two raw edges meet, just to make sure they sit nice and flat. Now, as ever with the collar pattern pieces, it's really helpful if you're doing a final garment as well, to make sure that you interface both either one or both of your collar stands and one or both of your collar itself. Obviously, we're just pattern drafting here and looking at the effects of that, so we're not doing the finishing sort of details to the garment at this stage. We're just looking at shapes and how they work together nicely. We're now going to attach our collar stand to our bodice around the neckline up here. So we are going to attach the flat side, the flatter side, to the neckline, leaving the curve side unsewn. So with right sides together, place it on top of the bodice and make sure that you've got a 1.5 centimetre overhang at this stage here. Again, because it's going onto a curve, you're going to have to ease this in a little bit. So just pin your critical points first around by your centre front and your centre back. Perfect. Once you've pinned that in place, we're then going to sew using our standard seam allowance. At this point, you can just grade the seam allowances if you want to. Next, we want to iron that seam allowance up towards the collar stand. Okay, perfect. We now want to attach our collar to the collar stand, and we're going to attach it to the top bit of the collar stand here. We're going to put the under collar with right sides together on top of the stand, on top of the collar stand, and the upper right side is going to be facing up. Now you should note that you've got a number of notches which are just going to line up beautifully from the collar to the collar stand. So pin those in place first and then continue pinning all the way around. Okay, at this point we're just going to baste that in place, and we're going to do that within the seam allowance, so about 1.2 centimetres offset from the raw edge. Guys, we're getting there, we're doing really good. We just need to finish off and sort out this final collar stand to go on. So we've got the right side of our second collar stand facing up, and I want you to flip that over, and along the straighter bottom edge, the one with only one notch on there and one notch there, I want you to fold that up by 1.5 centimetres seam allowance and press that in place. So now with right sides together, we are going to place the collar stand on top of everything else that we've done at the collar, and the two collar stands should match up perfectly. So we're just going to pin that all the way around. And what you should notice down at the bottom here is because we sewed that and turned it up there, they're going to line up absolutely beautifully at the edge of the button stand at that point. So go ahead and let's pin that in place. You can match up the notches as well. Brilliant. Let's carefully sew all the way around now, along the whole of that curve and along the flat line there, using a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Again, at this point, you can just grade the seam allowance if you want to. Lovely, just clip those corners if you need to. Excellent. So now all we need to do is just to flip that so that it is right sides together, so the two collar stands sit flush against each other, creating a nice round curve up at the top there. Just press that in place now. Lovely. So once you press that in place beautifully, you can see that the collar stand is actually overlapping over that seam line at that point. So it's going to create a nice finish on the inside. Obviously, we've not finished the rest of it beautifully. We're not doing the whole shirt construction. We're just looking at pattern drafting the collar at this point. So what I would then recommend is flipping it over this way up and pinning a line of stitches just where you would be stitching in the ditch along the base of the collar stand. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that we're catching the under collar on the inside with our pins at the same time. The reason why we are pinning it on the right side is because that's where our line of stitches is going to be sewn on the machine, with the right side of the garment facing up, so we can see exactly where we're stitching in the ditch. Just keep checking that you're catching the under the collar stand at all points as you're doing this. Great. Now we're going to sew a stitch in the ditch all the way along the bottom of the collar stand. Wonderful. The only thing left to do then is to sew the side seams together. So with right sides together, we are going to pin and sew those two side seams. Wonderful. Let's go and try that on now and see how it looks. Brilliant. So here we go. This is our beautiful shirt collar. Very, very traditional look, nice and smart. You can imagine if we extended the depth of the collar, it would look very different. If we extended the point or the outline of the collar as well, that would have a really big impact. And likewise, some pattern pieces have a really large collar stands. So take a look at those proportions and see what you would prefer to do. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've been Izzy at Minerva. It's been loads of fun looking at how to draft and create a shirt collar with you all. I do hope you found that really fun and you've enjoyed the process. As ever, we love to hear from our maker community here at Minerva. Please do post your comments below the video and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Don't forget that you can create a free Minerva account on our website where you can upload your pattern drafting journey. Please do share that with our community. We would absolutely love to see what you are creating. So thanks for joining me today. I'll see you next week.